expectation, form, and format. These are the things with which we will be playing today. Well, mostly. Welcome to Strip Coverlet, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Ford, and we are here for another short story discussion, which will appear in three separate playlists here on the channel. Number one being the short story discussion playlist, number two being the George Saunders playlist, but number three, a short story by short story read along for 10th of December by George Saunders. The short story in question today, Exhortation, which is maybe the most surprising short story in the collection. Maybe I think that from not from an innovation standpoint, but probably from the standpoint of expectation. So, there are three portions of today's video: a So What Happened recap of the short story, a literary criticism section where we talk about the literary goings on of this short story, and finally, a writer's corner where we talk about some of the notes we can extract from Exhortation as a writer ourselves. So, what happened? We are privy to a memorandum. How exciting. Management is having difficulty with morale and performance and etc., etc. In order to correct these things, management keeps using examples pertinent to the vacation that management just took. Anyway, everyone has to be better and do better, especially as it pertains to room 6. Also, hey, management's management says that not only will everyone be fired, they're not afraid to fire you because, of course, they'll fire you if you do not perform up to their expectations, but they could also find themselves on the business end of room 6 if need be. That would not be cool, would it? So, what are we talking about when we talk about Exhortation by George Saunders? Now, interestingly, in my opinion, very interestingly, possibly the most interesting thing about this short story is that the mechanism which allows this short story to be entertaining is that we all have expectations about what it is a memoranda is, what it is that a memorandum does, and how it is that a memorandum is to be conveyed. Right? None of those things happen in exhortation. We open sort of like this. I would not like to characterize this as a plea, although it may start to sound like one. Then we have an exclamation point in parentheses followed by a period. The fact is, we have a job to do. We have tacitly agreed to do it. Did you cash your last paycheck? I know I did. Ha ha ha. We also have to go a step further here. Agreed to do the job well. Now, we all know that one way to do a job poorly is to be negative about it. Say we need to clean a shelf. Let's use that example. If we spend the hour before the shelf cleaning talking down the process of cleaning the shelf, complaining about it, dreading it, investigating the moral niceties of cleaning the shelf, whatever, then what happens is we make the process of cleaning the shelf more difficult than it really is. You don't expect that from a memoranda. You don't expect that from your boss. You don't expect that in the workplace. There are other things that you do not expect from management in this short story, but mainly you don't expect room 6 to pop up in this sort of document, I guess, right? There are veiled threats in this document. There are moral obligations in this document. There are obviously grammatical misdeeds, if you will, in this document. There are all sorts of things that you would not expect to see, but probably some of them you have seen, right? We'll get to that a little bit later in the writer's criticism or in the writer's corner portion of this video. But the mechanism which allows this short story to be entertaining is that you have expectations about what this is. Now, if this short story were just meeting your expectations, it would not be very entertaining, would it? So the fact that we are able to utilize a memoranda at work in order to communicate a story that is mob like in its contents, though that is so you almost get the feeling that this is some dark ops program, right? The memoranda from a dark ops program manager who also happens to be something of an idiot is an entertaining thing, but it is an entertaining form and format that allows Saunders to hit us with some pretty heavy stuff, and we will get to that in a moment. But the next thing I want to do is there is often in every short story about a paragraph, about a paragraph where you can basically get the entirety of that short story from said paragraph. It's a weird little thing, but I promise you, if you look hard enough for it, it pops up time and time again. On page 87 of the standard print version of 10th of December, we get this. Anyway, October is how Andy entered a sort of, at least in my mind, de facto Hall of Fame, and is pretty much henceforth excluded from any real close monitoring of his numbers, at least by me, no matter how disconsolate and sort of withdrawn he gets. And I think we've all noticed he's gotten pretty disconsolate and withdrawn since October. You will not find me closely monitoring his numbers. Although, as for others, I cannot speak. Others may be monitoring that troubling fall off in Andy's numbers, although really, I hope they're not. That would not be so fair. And believe me, if I get wind of it, and I definitely will let Andy know, and if Andy's too depressed to hear me, I'll call Janice at home. This paragraph has everything that you need from this short story, with the exception of the mention of Room 6. It has the overbearing boss. It has the overbearing boss who's not really in control of the diarrhea of his mouth or her mouth. It has the, I think it's a him. I think. Anyway, not really in control of the diarrhea of the mouth. The boss is threatening. The boss is putting people's information out there almost aloof that that person will see it, but kind of probably they don't care that person's going to see it. There's all sorts of things going on in this short paragraph that are representative of the greater short story. If you had simply that paragraph as a flash fiction, we would have many of the same moral questions, many of the same characterizations, many of the same goings on as there are in the entire short story. All you would have to add is maybe a couple sentences, one at the beginning, one at the end, to sort of summarize the rest of the story. It is a weird thing, but it is true about most short stories. Now, I've talked about moral obligations, morality, things like that. The speaker in this memorandum mentions that as well. Moral niceties, I think they refer to it as. But there is something philosophical and possibly ethical, in my opinion, at the base of this story. It has to do with Karl Marx. I'm going to read something that I stole from Wikipedia. Karl Marx's theory of alienation describes the estrangement, Entfremdung, I have no idea how to say that, of people from aspects of their human nature, Gattungswesen, as a consequence of the division of labor and living in a society of stratified social classes. The alienation from the self is a consequence of being a mechanistic part of a social class, the condition of which estranges a person from their humanity. The theoretical basis of alienation is that a worker invariably loses the ability to determine life and destiny when deprived of the right to think of themselves as the director of their own actions, to determine the character of these actions, to define relationships with other people, and to own those items of value from goods and services produced by their own labor. Although the worker is an autonomous, self realized being, as an economic entity, this worker is directed to goals and diverted to the activities that are dictated by the bourgeois, who own the means of production. Basically, you have a job that tells you to do certain things, and from doing those certain things and being counted on to do those certain things and not making other decisions in that job, you become estranged from the entire process, estranged from the end result. You become not responsible for the entirety of the thing. So you're the guy at Ford who puts on the tires on the assembly line. You don't build cars. You put tires on. You don't have any real sense of accomplishment per car that rolls off that line. So at the end of the day, your hands hurt, your back hurts, your shoulder hurts, you're tired, you're sweaty, but you feel you've accomplished nothing. That is sort of what is being described here. That is a little bit of what is going on in this short story. The bourgeois who own the means of production in order to extract from the workers the maximum amount of surplus value in the course of business competition among industrialists. In the economic and philosophic manuscripts of 1844, Karl Marx expressed the Infrembunger, inf, in, Infremdung, the theory of estrangement from the self. Philosophically, the theory of relies upon the essence of Christianity by Ludwig Feuerbach, which states that the idea of a supernatural God has alienated the natural characteristics of the human being. Moreover, Max Stirner extended Feuerbach's analysis in The Ego of Its Own, 1845, that even the idea of humanity is an alienating concept for individuals to intellectually consider in its full philosophic implications. Marx and Friedrich Engels responded to these philosophical propositions in the German ideology. So, a whole lot of a whole lot of open threads here into that little bit of the video here, but I think that it's necessary to sort of look at some of the. I don't really believe anything that Marx was talking about here completely, right? I think that there are some shades of this with being alienated from what it is that you're doing at work. I don't know that I necessarily believe this is part of some grand master plan from the industrialists. I think that what it is the more cars you build, the more you get paid, and the more you can pay your workers. All these sort of things factor into it. But I do think that this is a compelling idea that there is some estrangement from the product for the individual doing the labor. It is interesting to me, and I think that that is a little bit of what is going on here. Now, obviously, part of what room 6 is and what these people are being estranged by is the things they are being forced to do inside room 6. Is this a torture room? We have no idea, but we are left to draw some conclusions. Otherwise, why wouldn't you, as a former agent of room 6, want to be subject to room 6? But just sort of extracting, right? We can, I think, look at this and understand that even if that is what is sort of going on in room 6, it is not necessary that the analogy or the thrust of the short story be towards that sort of thing. You have to have a metaphor in here somewhere, and that would be, in my opinion, where it is. The torturous metaphor is just the idea of your labor being estranged from you. Now, moving on to the writer's corner portion of this video. Say it with me now. I am not George Saunders. The last video in this series, what we did is we got into the idea that you're not going to get a 37-page short story published as a writer that is not a George Saunders of the world. In the same way, here, you're not going to get a fake memoranda published, especially in light of the fact that George Saunders has already done it. So this trick is trucked. This little quirk has been taken. We can't do this. In fact, I would encourage you not to play with form and format to this extent. Why? Because it seems gimmicky. Even when someone like George Saunders does it, it feels gimmicky. He's just able to pull it off. When I was I went to grad school for creative writing, and one of the things that struck me there was, hey, you can't get away with that unless you can, right? You can't use adverbs unless you can. You can't toy with form and format like this unless you can. You can't do XYZ unless you can. So you can do it, but it's not going to mean that it's great. And oftentimes, I think that as writers ourselves, what we will do is we will gas ourselves up, and I totally pulled that off. Probably not, right? So I think that the best course of advice, um, and you see, I mean, I think the best way to do things is to write compelling stories without gimmicks. And in the event that you become someone who is able to get published and someone that people are seeking out, then you get to pull the gimmicks out, right? Now, the number two thing here, show don't tell, but it's with frustration. Here's what I mean by that. You've heard of the objective correlative, you've heard of the idea show don't tell. Never are we being told that the management portion of this story, that the writer, that the speaker, that the person behind the memoranda, what is the name here? Todd Birkin, maybe? Is that what it was? Todd Burney. Never are we told, hey, Todd's an idiot. We're shown Todd's an idiot. Todd can't write a letter. Todd can't keep on the same page. Todd can't X, Y, and Z, and he writes uh, a very frustrating memoranda for anyone who is trying to read it, and he is completely aloof to the plight of his employees, right? He's an idiot. But that's not really what it is that we're being shown here. You've gotten this email at work. You know Todd. You've had to answer to Todd. You have had to look Todd in the eyes after saying something absolutely stupid and give him a straight answer. You've had to do that. You've had this boss. The ingenious part about what it is that George Saunders is doing here is not that he's showing you Todd's an idiot. No, you understand that. You've read the story. The ingenious part about what is going on in this short story, George Saunders is putting you in your workplace frame of mind. You know what it's like to have to answer to Todd. And so when you see this memoranda, you remember that idiot boss that you had. And not only do you know that Todd's an idiot, but you are now experiencing what it is like to be one of Todd's employees. That is the true ironic brilliance of this short story. Now, what advice, what writing tips are there to be taken from this? Sometimes, guys, sometimes the best lesson that we can learn as writers is to just sit back and appreciate greatness. There are some Ernest Hemingway short stories. There are some Emily Dickinson poems that when I get to the end of them, I just have to, it's like I have to light a cigarette, right? I don't have the words. I don't have the lesson downloaded in my brain. That is such a beautiful irony that the real dummy in this short story is Todd's employees because they have to be employees of Todd. The real brilliance of this short story is that by you reading this short story like you are, you automatically become one of Todd's dummy employees. So, yeah, man, sometimes you just got to enjoy it. I I don't know how you get there as a writer. I don't know how you come to that conclusion. Hey, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put my reader at work, piss him off that way. That'll go over good, right? I don't know how you get to that point where you think, yeah, not only is this a good idea, but I can totally pull it off. But Saunders does it. Anyway, that's all I have for this video. If you like or appreciate what it is that I do here, hitting the like button really does help me out, as it tells YouTube to share this video with other literature lovers. If you find yourself here by chance but not design, literature is the only thing I talk about on this channel, dropping multiple videos every week. There is poetry every Monday, and I hope to have you back for the next one.